Hi guys, since we're now past the checkpoint for Module 3, I thought this would be a good time to go over JavaScript because it's pretty important for the XSS and the CSRF challenges. So, what is JavaScript? Is it like Java? No, it's not like Java. It's a completely different language with completely different syntax. It's a scripting language for websites, and basically it gives you the interactive functionality that a lot of websites have. And because it has all of this power to display things in the website, it's also very dangerous if we give access to JavaScript to some malicious attacker. So, okay, so what can we do with JavaScript? So the first function that I'd like to go over is the alert function. So it's pretty straightforward. All it does is it makes a pop-up on your screen. So let's take a look. So in this alert demo, I just have this alert. So if I go to alert demo, we have this alert pop up. Okay, but something important to remember is that while this alert is active, nothing else will execute. So we have all of this code that calculates prime numbers, and even though like we've waited for a pretty long time, it's not going to execute until we click OK. So now that I click OK, now it'll start printing out all of these prime numbers. Yeah, so that's just something important to remember when you're using the alert function. Okay, next function is console.log. So all this does is it prints out something to the console to let you debug basically. And the one advantage that it has over alert is alert. Like it makes this thing pop up. If you have a bunch of alerts in a row, this is gonna like pop up every single time that alert gets called. So you're gonna have to keep clicking OK, 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 even though like the console could just like print it out like all continuously. And for that, we have this bug demo. Uh, Basically, what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to go through every number from 2 to 1000, and it should then compare with every number less than it and check like is it divisible by that number. And if it's not divisible by any number, it should be still be prime, and then we should print out that it's prime. Oh, and let's delete that. Okay, so let's go to that page. So this is our bug demo. Okay, and for some reason, we've actually printed out that every single number is prime, even like the even numbers, which definitely shouldn't be happening. So let's try and figure out what's happening. If we add a console.log statement here and we go through, so basically what we expect is this should only be true for numbers that are actually prime. But if we reload the page, I can say it's still true for every single number. Okay, so uh, how do we debug this more? So that means that like even when we think it should be prime, it's still getting set to true. So let's add another print statement here, and we will print out I and then J. So just to make sure we're like checking every pair correctly. Okay, and so if you like notice, there's actually something weird going on. We're trying to do I modulo J, so J should be smaller so that we can check that I is divisible by J, but actually every single time J is actually bigger than I. So it looks like we actually switched around the order here. It should be J modulo I. Okay, so now that we add this, does that fix our problem then? Okay, it still doesn't fix our problem. We still have every single number is prime. So let's add our print statement back here again. And we reload the page. Okay, so it actually turns out we're actually only printing out true now for the numbers that actually are prime. Like 998 is false now, but 997 is prime, so we print out true. So that means the errors happening here between when we log the prime and when we like actually print out like this number is prime. And the reason is because we actually used a single equal sign because of instead of a double equal sign. So if we just add double equals, now we should have no more bugs. Yeah. So now we are only printing out the actual prime numbers. Okay. The next function is the fetch function. So basically this is like the JavaScript equivalent of like curl or like Python requests, except in JavaScript. And on this side, we've got a meme by Honto, who you might have seen like helping out in Discord. Basically, there's like some properties of fetch that make it kind of tricky to use. And we'll go to this type. So basically, fetch, when you fetch a URL and you want to like get the contents of that URL, you actually have to call another function, which is this .den function, because normally fetch doesn't actually like block your code from running. What that means is when you're fetching something, you don't actually like, or you don't have to wait until the fetch finishes before you can execute the next line of code. And this is pretty important because sometimes fetch requests take a really, really long time to finish. So in this demo here, I have this server, and this server has this /slow endpoint where if you send a request to it, it sleeps for 5 seconds before actually responding. And in this promises demo, we have a button. Oh, here, okay. We have a button called this slow button. This one like calls our prime number calculating function again, and then prints out this slow button clicked. We also have this fetch button, which fetches this slow endpoint. And just to show that it's actually pretty slow, we'll just make a request to it. And you can see we have to wait 5 seconds before it actually responds. Yeah, okay, hello, slow. So, okay, so, but because the fetch function that isn't actually blocking, these two buttons will behave differently. We also have this big red button that also like responds instantly. Async demo. So just to show you, like if I click big red button, it makes this text show up. If I click this fetch button, I can still click the big red button in the meantime. And then eventually when the server responds, we get the fetch button clicked. But if we click the slow button, what happens is that we can't click any of the buttons while it's doing its calculations because it is blocking. So like click, 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 nothing's happening. Okay, and it turns out like everything got clicked at once because uh, the slow button, even though it's blocking, like we can still like the browser still keeps track of our clicks. Okay, so that's like how the fetch function normally works. So it doesn't actually block. It doesn't actually block your fetches. Um, okay, but what if you actually do want to use the result of your fetch function? Then you have to use these .then or await like keywords and functions in order to get our code to work correctly. So here in our promises demo, we have like several fetches. So this one, it just fetches and then we log what it returns. This one, we fetch it and then we call .then, and using that response, we log the return response. And then after that, we have this .then using the response. We then return the text of the response and then .then, and we print out the actual text of the response. And finally, this is like the same thing as this .then, except using await. Okay, so let's take a look at that one. Okay, so this one, like we don't actually have any stuff on the page. This is all in the console. So when we don't use any then at all, uh, it just prints out this promise thing. And then the promise is like, uh, it says state fulfilled. The value is this response. with another like stuff. When we do after resolve value of fetch, so this is that same response. This response also like is another like response, but we still don't actually have access to the text that we're looking for. So here when we did the get the response and then get the text, we finally get our text, which is hello, and that's regular because that's what the server returns. And when we use await, that's also the same thing. We also get the same hello regular because await also works the same way. Okay, the final thing that we'll go over is selecting HTML elements. So sometimes like you want to interact with elements on the web page, and this is the case for one of the challenges. So there's a few functions that you can use to interact with elements. One is this get element by ID. Basically, you tell it the ID of an element and it can get that element. There's also other get element by whatever functions. You can also like get element by name, get element by tag, and stuff like that. There's also a query selector all. This gets everything that matches a certain query, like more than one element. And you could also just have the ID of the element, but this isn't really recommended, and I'll show you why in a moment. Okay, so this is our selector demo. We have a bunch of elements. This has an ID of A. This has a class of B. This has a class of C. This also has a class of C, and this has an ID of D. Okay, so what we do is we first select using get element by ID, we select the element with ID A. Then with query selector, we select the element with class B. With query selector all, we select all elements with class C. And then with just using the variable ID or the element ID, which is just D, we can also do it. But what I have here is I actually set the value of this other D, and what it does is it breaks both of our functions. So let's show that. Okay, so here is our output. So first one, we got the imdiv with IDA. Second one, we got imdiv with class B. The third one, it returned basically an array, and each of these is its own individual element. So we printed out I am the first div with class C, and then I am the second div with class C. And finally, we tried to select this element with ID D, and it does work the first time. But after we set the value of D with this line of code, it no longer works. So we printed out 1337 and then undefined because 1337 does not have this inner text. Okay, so that's it for these this like JavaScript video. If you're interested in web security, some of us are actually working on a web security dojo, and once we're finished with that, this will explore like more of the web security concepts that are like briefly explored in this module in much more detail. So if you're interested, look forward to that. All right. So yeah, hope this video helped you guys, and good luck with your challenges.